civilians in damaged buildings. Hamas has fired hundreds of rockets at targets in Israel, including the city of Tel Aviv. At least 5 people in Israel have been killed. The United Nations Security Council is set to hold an urgent meeting on Wednesday over the unrest. A man accused of killing 8 people in the U.S. city of Atlanta has been indicted on murder charges. The 22-year-old faces the death penalty if convicted. He's accused of going on a shooting spree in 3 massage parlors in March this year. 6 of the victims were Asian women. The European Union's Foreign Affairs representative says North Macedonia meets the conditions to start talks to join the EU. Joseph Borrell spoke after meeting North Macedonia's Prime Minister Zoran Zaev in Brussels. Borrell praised his efforts to align the country's foreign and security policies with EU member states. This is DW News from Berlin. You can get all the latest from our website, dw.com.
He was a one-term U.S. president, the only president to be impeached twice. His party controlled Congress when he moved into the White House. His party lost control as he moved out. And yet, Donald Trump's grip on the Republicans is as tight as ever. The party of Lincoln thinks it can regain power if and only if it remains the party of Trump. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, she disagrees, and she's about to pay the price. Tonight, the politics of power in America, loyalty to Trump is a must, loyalty to the truth, a liability. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
The Republican Party is moving away from the, true Republican ideals.
How do we build a party based on lies?
This election was the big lie, and Liz Cheney is a liar.
Trump broke it because he cared for this country.
Betraying President Trump, the enormous work that President Trump has done for our country.
A fealty test to Donald Trump is the measurement for staying as a real Republican, according to some.
And the country loves Trump.
Also, coming up in this pandemic, we wear masks to protect others and we get vaccinated to protect ourselves. And what have we done to protect our pets? Tonight, the shot from Russia with love.
We planned to start a family and heard that COVID could be dangerous for pregnant women, so it's better to be safe. It doesn't hurt the cat.
To our viewers on PBS in the United States and to all of you around the world, welcome. We begin the day with Donald Trump, the Republican Party, and the price for siding with the truth. A half year after his election defeat, Donald Trump is still peddling the rigged election lie. Why should it matter what a former one-term president thinks? Usually it wouldn't matter on Wall Street, Main Street, or on Capitol Hill, but these are not usual times. The Republican Party remains the party of Donald Trump. A majority of Republicans say they believe the big lie about the election, and Republican members of Congress have taken note. The most notable exception is Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Cheney is the daughter of a former Republican vice president. She is as conservative as it gets in America. Republicans gave her the nickname Darth Vader, and they meant it as a term of endearment. But the force is no longer with Liz Cheney. She has been open about her criticism of Donald Trump and his lies about the election. She sees Trump as a threat to U.S. democracy and has urged her party to distance itself from Trump. Instead, the party is distancing itself from Liz Cheney. On Wednesday, House Republicans are expected to remove Cheney as the number 3 House Republican leader. A demotion for her and a lesson to others of what can happen if you don't pledge allegiance to Donald Trump.
Liz Cheney, how about that? The good news is in her state, she's been censored, and in her state, her poll numbers have dropped faster than any human being I've ever seen. So hopefully they'll get rid of her with the next election.
It seems as though the Republican Party is trying to identify where it stands. And they're in the midst of significant sort of mini revolution going on in the Republican Party. I've been a Democrat for a long time. We've gone through periods where we've had internal fights and disagreements. I don't ever remember any like this.
All right, I want to bring in our Washington Bureau Chief, Enos Pohl. Good evening to you, Enos. President Biden says the Republicans are in the middle of an identity crisis and that they don't seem to know who they are. How would you define the party? Who are the Republicans?
Well, it became a party that cares more about staying in power than anything. A party which is willing to sell its soul to not lose Donald Trump and probably even more so his millions of supporters. Many within the party, Brent, even leadership that really were legislating with the expectation that Trump would be gone soon, but he isn't. And now that's what they realize. And until they're not willing to split from the former president, their identity is defined by the Trump brand, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, there is this tendency, reporters were guilty of it as well, to refer to the Republicans as if they're this huge monolith. We know that's not fair and it's not accurate. Liz Cheney, she's just the latest example of the diversity in the party. You just returned from a trip to Florida, which is home to a lot of retired Republicans. Tell us about that.
So the party leadership, as I just mentioned, said that they are a Big Tent party, but you are only welcome under this Big Tent if you are not outspoken against Trump. And that's exactly what Liz Cheney did. She thinks that truth matters more than Trump. I went to the villages. This is one of the biggest, actually, retirement communities close in Orlando. I went there to see the reactions to Matt Gaetz. He's one of Trump's favorites, congressman, and if anything, it became really crystal clear to me that diehard Trump supporters are still around and are very unlikely to disappear soon. Let's have a look. It's in places like this, here in the villages in Florida, where the future of the Republican Party will be decided. All the people who have come this afternoon have one thing in common. They are convinced that Donald Trump won the election.
Trump broken one because he cared for this country. He got cheated, and the country loves Trump.
Congressman Matt Gaetz and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene started their rally America First at a time when the battle for the party's identity is in full swing.
So today, we send a strong message to the weak establishment in both parties. America First isn't going away. We're going on tour.
Representative Liz Cheney is being punished for saying that truth matters more than loyalty to Donald Trump.
President Trump and the extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party.
Outside of the venue where Gaetz and Greene are rallying, a small group of Republicans have gathered to express their vision of the future of the party.
I believe that the Republican Party is moving away from the, true Republican ideals, embracing extremism, and nobody's listening to anybody else, and they're just yelling and talking about hiding under a cloak of patriotism.
The only people who can stop the Trump train are the Republicans themselves. At this point, doesn't seem very likely.
The Trump train keeps on going, Enos, headed for the midterm elections in the U.S. next year, 2022. History shows that Republicans usually do well in midterms when there's a Democrat in the White House. So shouldn't they be less focused on themselves and more focused on the issues now?
Well, in an ideal world, that would be the case, Brent, but here in Washington right now, power is the name of the game, and they are using the opportunity to slow down and attack the Biden administration, whether it is the situation at the border to Mexico or the approach to foreign policy. And that's absolutely not good for the country, but that's what matters for them. They want to regain power in November 2022. And this will be very, very difficult for Joe Biden if this happens.
Yeah, if the Republicans win back control of the House or the Senate next year, they will see victory as a confirmation of their allegiance to Donald Trump. And that would definitely be a short-term gain. What do Republican voters, what do they see the long-term for their party?
Well, right, it would be a big win for Trump and his political brand, no doubt with that, but it would be devastating for all the plans the Biden administration has. You know, let's think about the $1 trillion infrastructural plan, for example, or the family plan, or his Green New Deals. These are all ideas, all political plans that need time to be accomplished. And if he would lose both chamber in November 2022, that would be far, far too little time for him to accomplish what he wants to accomplish with his administration.
Our Washington Bureau Chief Enos Poll on the story for us tonight. Enos, as always, thank you. You could say it's the British equivalent of the U.S. presidential State of the Union speech. Today, Queen Elizabeth opened a new session of Parliament. It's her first major public engagement since the death of her husband, Prince Philip. This year's ceremony was pared back because of the pandemic, with the Queen wearing a day dress instead of her usual robes and crown. And this time, for the first time in decades, the Queen was not accompanied by her husband. What remains unchanged? The speech delivered by the Queen was written by the Prime Minister. We'll go to the UK for analysis in just a moment. Let's listen to an excerpt of the Queen's address.
My government will strengthen and renew democracy and the Constitution. Legislation will be introduced to ensure the integrity of elections, protect freedom of speech, and restore the balance of power between the executive, legislature, and the courts.
All right, I want to bring in Quentin Peel. He's an associate fellow with the Europe program at the think tank Chatham House. He's a familiar face to our viewers. Good evening to you, Quentin. Strengthening democracy, the introduction of photo IDs for voters at elections. Is Britain's democracy, is it under threat through voter fraud?
No, I don't think it is. And the curious thing about this is that a certain person called Boris Johnson wrote a furious column several years ago in which he said if he were ever asked for his ID on the street, he'd tear it up. And he opposed the whole idea very much when he wasn't Prime Minister. Now he seems to be bringing it in because of some rather mythical idea that there is rampant fraud at the ballot box. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Maybe he's spending some time in Washington, D.C. Boris Johnson has given himself the opportunity to scrap fixed terms for Parliament. How do you read that?
Well, I think what this Queen's speech is really all about is Boris Johnson preparing to call an election rather sooner than he might have expected. So the last election, 2019, the next one should be 5 years after that. But he can call one sooner if he changes the law. And I think he's feeling rather pleased at the way the elections went last week, certainly in England, where he actually managed to gain quite a lot of votes in the heartland of the Labour Party up in the north of England.
Let's take a listen to another section of the Queen's speech from today. Take a listen.
My ministers will promote the strength and integrity of the Union. Measures will be brought forward to strengthen devolved government in Northern Ireland and address the legacy of the past.
The Queen there, of course, she's touching on this idea of national unity, which is high on the agenda after a strong showing by Scottish nationalists in last week's elections.
Yes, indeed, and I don't think there's very much substance there as to what they intend to do. The key issue clearly in Scotland is, will they demand another referendum on Scottish independence? And there's nothing really in this legislation or anywhere else that would head that his real hope is what he calls levelling up. That's to say, spending more money on things like infrastructure, on things like job training in the economically more depressed parts of the country, which might include Scotland and certainly include the north of England. And if that's the case, if he really does put serious money into that, then in fact he could be looking for another term in office before expected.
There was a lot about overseas trade and Britain carving out a leading place in the world, global Britain. Is this about more than just sending gunboats across the channel to France?
Yes, there are quite a lot of bits and pieces in here which one might call a post-Brexit agenda, post-COVID and post-Brexit. So what he's trying to do is give himself more freedom to subsidise companies that may be facing a lot of red tape now that Britain is outside the European single market. And also he's backing an idea of introducing free enterprise zones, low-tax free enterprise zones, that he might also put in places like the north of England. And that's another way he might try and use the post-Brexit situation to spend a bit more money in parts of the country which haven't been doing so well.
And Quentin, today was the first time that we've seen the Queen since the funeral of Prince Philip, and many will remember that image of her sitting there all alone, the sadness of that moment almost palpable. And today was the Queen's first appearance since the death of her husband. What did you make of her?
I think she's amazing, actually. She's 95 years old. She handled it all with great grace and aplomb and calmness. It was a bit of a rag bag of a speech that she had to give, but it was quite short. And she got through it with flying colours, really. I'm not sure that she really could come away from it saying, I understand what my government is trying to do. The Financial Times described it as full of ideas, but not much intellectual coherence.
Yeah, well, as you said, she is a woman believed or not. Quentin Gill, Associate Fellow with the Europe Program at Chatham House. As always, Quentin, it's good talking with you. We appreciate your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Scientists believe that COVID-19 most likely originated in a wild animal. Now some have turned their concerns to our pets. Our furry friends could become carriers of the disease and even develop potential viral mutations that are dangerous to humans. Researchers in Finland and the United States are working on a coronavirus vaccine for animals, but Russia, it appears, is quicker. It's just released the first coronavirus vaccine to be used on our pets.
This cat is a pioneer, albeit an unwilling one. Kesha the cat is one of the first recipients of the first ever COVID-19 vaccine for animals. His owners, Daniel and Elvira, say they signed up for the vaccination just to be on the safe side. Our cat goes outside a lot. Sometimes he doesn't even come home at night because he's doing his own thing, but he lives with us, so we're always concerned he could bring an infection home with him. We plan to start a family and heard that COVID could be dangerous for pregnant women, so it's better to be safe. It doesn't hurt the cat. The vaccine will provide these cats with immunity from the coronavirus for at least 6 months, according to the doctors here. Animals can show respiratory symptoms of the disease, problems breathing, a cough, or a loss of their sense of smell. Essentially, the symptoms are the same as they are for people, just in a much, much lighter form. And it's not the symptoms themselves that are a concern here. The World Health Organization has warned that animals, including minks, could become carriers for the coronavirus and even pass it back to people. Last year, 17 million minks were culled in Denmark after some of them caught COVID-19. The Russian-made vaccine, called Carnivac-Cov, could prevent that, according to developers. The country's veterinary and agricultural watchdog, Rossellkosnadzor, began trials on rabbits, dogs, cats, foxes, and other animals in October. Now they say the jab is ready for mass production. The vaccine was developed as a preventative measure, something aimed at the future, in case there are negative situations like the development of a mutation that can be passed between different types of animals. We shouldn't forget that any measures for disease prevention for animals prevent people getting sick as well, because around 70% of human diseases come from animals. The vaccine's developers say there has already been demand for the jab from businesses in several European countries, including in Germany. Rossellhosnadzor recommends the vaccine for animals kept in close contact, including at fur farms and zoos. They say that for now, pets like these cats are very unlikely to become a risk to their owners.
All right, for more, I'd like to welcome William Koresh. He's the Executive Vice President for Health and Policy at EcoHealth Alliance. That's a global nonprofit organization dealing with scientific research into the connections between humans, animals, and environmental health. William, it's good to have you on the program. This story had people in the newsroom interested and excited. There was a combination of talk about vaccines and meows going on. But before we talk about that, I want to ask you about the coronavirus. Is there an agreement among scientists and researchers that the virus that causes COVID-19, that it originated in animals, in a wild animal?
Well, it's most likely as all the closest cousins of the coronavirus have been found in bats. There's quite a few of them, really hundreds of related coronaviruses, and a large group really related to COVID-19 that's found normally in bats. So whether or not that happened in the last year or that was several years ago when it became established in humans, or maybe it got into some other type of animal and then into humans, all the evidence points to that.
If a vaccine has been produced for animals, I mean, that implies two things, that the virus could be a threat to them. It also implies that maybe that our pets could be a potential threat to our health. Are they when it comes to this virus?
Well, so far what we've seen are some animals getting infected, and some species, some groups of animals are certainly more susceptible. And we've seen that in what's called the mustelids, the minks and the ferrets are extremely susceptible. Cats are somewhat in the next group. Domestic cats have been getting infected, and some of which get sick. Exotic cats or non-domestic cats like tigers, lions are also susceptible. We've seen that in zoos, so there's that possibility. And of course, non-human primates, our ape cousins, are certainly susceptible, and there's been reports of those in gorillas, also in captive situations such as zoos.
When you look at the situation around the globe, consider the situation in India right now or in Brazil, how useful is it then to be focused on animal vaccines against the coronavirus?
Well, the disease is most easily transmitted among people. And we have seen that over the decades with other of these diseases that were referred to as coming from animals. The ones we think of it in a One Health approach. The health of people and animals are inextricably linked, and also with the environment. So we've seen HIV/AIDS, which originated in animals, but it's become a human-to-human-to-human disease. And we've seen that over and over. And that's the case with COVID-19. It's become a human disease. And so your chances of getting it from an animal are minuscule compared to getting it from a human. But we do have some evidence, certainly in the case of minks and mink farms, where it has come back into humans. So we are concerned that it could have become established in the wild, even if we get it under control in people. Now that we have billions of people potentially infected around the planet, that's what happened with the plague or the Black Death. As humans spread it around Earth, the disease became established in wild animals and animals all over the world. So now we have plague everywhere, but it was spread by people and then became established in animal populations. So it's definitely a concern, something to look out for the future.
You mentioned meat, for example, and the economics cynic among us would say that this new vaccine is just a shot in the arm for meat farmers. Is it?
Well, possibly. I don't know what the economics are in each
country about whether the mink farmers have to pay for it themselves or if it's going to be a public health application like we do with controlling rabies. Some countries, the owner pays for a rabies vaccination for their pet, and in some countries that's provided free. So it really depends on the situation in each country around the world.
And don't we really need this animal vaccine or vaccine for our pets because of the troubling level of vaccine hesitancy that we're seeing among human beings?
Well, I think that's a very good point about, if it raises people's comfort level to see it being used in their pets and if they're comfortable enough for their pet to be vaccinated, then they may take it themselves. I think that's great. I think people should have the option when those vaccines become available. Once again, in some countries, they're struggling enough to get people vaccinated, and we know that the animals are at lower risk, so it might not be the top priority, but where vaccination is becoming widespread, and there's an opportunity to vaccinate animals, and people want it, and there's cost effective, in the case that they might have to pay for it, then those kind of the stars align. I don't see a big problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder, though, is this going to be maybe a luxury item that some people in the first world have for their pets? I guess we'll see, because we still have to convince these people to get the shots themselves. William Koresh, Executive Vice President for Health and Policy. It would. Thank you. William, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the day is almost done. The conversation, it continues online. You'll find us on Twitter, either at DW News, or you can follow me at Brent Goff TV. And remember, whatever happens between now and then, tomorrow is another day. We'll see you then, everybody.
We want to take things to the edge.
Volcanoes, war zones, and disasters. Extreme tourism.
In 45 minutes on DW.
The amount of plastic is increasing every year.
For many in Ghana, working on landfills is the only work there is.
Holiday destinations are drowning in plastic waste. We rewind and take a look at the causes.
Every year, Europe exports over 1 million tons of plastic waste. Is there another way? After all, the environment isn't recyclable. Make up your own mind. DW, made for minds.
If you've gone for a drive, cycle or walk around parts of Germany anytime lately, you may have come across huge advertising billboards asking the question if we can stop global warming or create a fairer world. And how many of us think about the products we buy, where they came from and who made them? Is it our job, the consumer, or the responsibility of multi-billion euro corporations? Shareholder pressure is starting to make boardrooms more accountable, and TV commercials targeting shoppers are clear. The trend, here in Europe at least, is towards green and fair. I'm not here to pull at your heartstrings, but any football mum or dad would sleep better at night if they knew their kid was kicking around a soccer ball that hadn't been stitched together by the tiny hands of a boy or girl around the same age on the other side of the world in Pakistan, where officials have failed after decades of efforts to fully eradicate child labor.
Soccer is a global sport, whether it's children or adults playing for fun, or the pros, like in the German Bundesliga. It's a global business worth billions. But what of the soccer balls? Where do they come from? Most of them come from Sialkot in Pakistan. For decades, the city has been the world's largest producer of soccer balls. Thousands of local people work in the industry. In the past, all the balls were sewn by hand. But times have changed, at least at this company, Bola Gema. It produces 160,000 soccer balls a year, many in automated production. The industry used to be notorious. Many workers took the balls home with them, where family members, including children, stitched them by hand.
We produce everything in-house only, and we only allow people who are 18 or over to work in our factory. Our focus is on producing high-quality balls. To achieve that, we have to provide more benefits and good wages to our workers.
In 2015, Bola Gema was certified as a fair trade company, indicating that it meets international standards for working conditions.
A fair trade company has to have fixed labor contracts with all its employees, with agreed working hours, better working conditions, rights to representation within the company. Workers are entitled to sick pay and maternity leave. These are all conditions that the whole company has to adhere to.
At Derby Star, the supplier for the German Bundesliga, all the soccer balls are made in Pakistan. At peak times, the headquarters in Germany sends out nearly 100,000 balls a month. The management here is satisfied that its partner company in Pakistan does not use child labor.
We can keep a check on that by ensuring that no soccer balls are produced in private homes. Nearly 20 years ago, we opened our own sewing centers where we're able to monitor the process.
But has the industry really changed? Even now, only a fraction of soccer balls are produced under certified fair trade conditions. The mayor of Sialkot assures us that working conditions have improved. He says there was a lot of international pressure.
Here in Sialkot, we have a level of compliance with workers' standards and protection of workers' rights that can't be found anywhere else in Pakistan. Our customers pay for Social Security and pension benefits for our employees, which we pass on in full. These things didn't exist before. And as we have complied with employee protection standards, the pricing has become more competitive.
But the head of Derby Star in Germany says soccer balls with fair trade certification are still the exception and are 5 to 10% more expensive. The Bundesliga soccer ball isn't a fair trade product either.
The percentage of fair trade balls is negligible. They only make up about 4 to 5% of overall sales. It's partly because the fair trade seal isn't as high profile in the industry or amongst the clubs as we would all like it to be.
Back to Pakistan and Bola Gema. The company says it wants to become a role model for the entire industry. But managers here say customers companies aren't always willing to play ball and shell out more for their product.
Other than European Union or
apart from the European Union and the Scandinavian countries, buyers from other regions don't value the fair trade seal because they don't like the higher price. But we want to continue to be a role model for fair trade, not only to provide additional benefits for our workers, but also so that our workers put more effort into the fair trade products because they know these provide them with extra benefits and premiums.
Premiums मिल रहे हैं, extra benefits मिल रहे हैं.
Despite the lack of industry-wide standards, it's clear that working conditions in soccer ball production have improved here over the last decade. But worker benefits cost money, and there's now a very real risk that parts of the production could be transferred to lower-wage countries like China or Myanmar, where working conditions may not be fair or even monitored.
And just because it's fair trade isn't a 100% guarantee, their inspectors can't be everywhere all the time. Now to something that is free. It shines from time to time here in Germany, and the nation's been ranked among the world's top installers of solar panels for several years now. But the stats aren't all that impressive when you take a look at solar power's chunk of the overall energy mix. The same goes for most other countries. Time to crunch the numbers with DW's Maja Kalman.
It's astonishing, but clean energy from the sun, solar energy, has become the cheapest way to generate electricity. It's even cheaper than coal. And yet it produces only 3% of the world's electricity. Why aren't we using way more of it? How did it get so cheap? And what does all this have to do with ducks? Let's find out. First, let's take a look at how much the price for solar has fallen.
I started this job as an analyst of solar in 2005, and then I thought solar was ridiculously expensive.
Jenny Chase is the head solar analyst at research for Bloomberg NEF.
You pay about $4 a watt for a solar panel, and today you pay about 20 cents for that same watt.
And that is just the last 15 years. If you look further back, the price drop is even more impressive. How did this happen?
It's been a long story, but it's unbelievable.
Gregory Nemeth has written a book about this.
No one country did it. It was an exchange of one country building on another. The US created the technology.
The modern-day solar cell made from silicon was invented in the US in 1954. Back then it mainly got used in the space industry and was still super expensive. But as the technology progressed, prices started to fall.
Germany created a market.
In 2000, Germany passed a law to boost renewable energy development. This was big because it put a fixed price on energy generated from sources like wind or solar. That gave people and companies a reason to set up solar panels. And for them to do that, someone needed to build these solar panels.